Rally for commodities in the week that just finished, and we are going to discuss what's coming next with Jerry Gidel right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, we had a very significant rally after some weather issues in South America. And I wonder, what are you seeing as the upcoming price levels for corn and soybeans specifically?
Well, those two markets definitely had impacted both by the weather that continues to be kind of a very modest moisture in Argentina, and that impacting both corn and soybeans there. And then and of course, then the USDA's final production numbers and their implications on their ending stocks, and also how the USDA looks at their various South American crop prospects at this point. Particularly, soybeans took the immediate reaction there after Thursday's production and S&D report, primarily because of the fact that instead of a slight increase in the production, they actually saw that production number go down 70 million, which really wasn't on anybody's radar, even mine. I was looking for a modest decline, but nothing like that. From the standpoint, they both reduced the yield and also reduced the harvested area by about 300,000 acres, which is not kind of the norm. If you reduce acres, you can also boost yields a little bit, but that's really because of the really dry late finish in the U.S. here. There are quite a few states had minor reductions in their yields, and probably the most interesting was Illinois. Went down 1 bushel to 63, while their corn yield stayed very strong at 214 bushels average in their latest USDA numbers. The soybeans situation there, because of that smaller production, and that the USDA had to look around here because this time of year they're very cautious about taking soybean stocks in the U.S. below 200 million unless there's going to be some kind of difficulty in South America. Now, we had some in that we just talked about in Argentina and dryness there, but at the same time, Brazil's prospects are still looking very positive. So they had to look around and they worked on the export total. The exports, definitely there's going to be stronger competition from South America, or at least the prospects are there for it. The interesting thing about it is they took 55 million bushels off their export expecs, but right now we're about 60 or 70 million ahead of last year's pace on our sales. So that's really now I know that there's going to be a kind of a stonewall when South America and Brazil gets actually harvesting, but I wonder about that number. But I think that was a number that was kind of forced by the fact that the stocks report and the December 1st, the stocks reports is kind of a check on the final production number. And when that number came in, 110 less than the trade was expecting, and I think it was possibly at least 8 or 90 below last year. That they had to look around and figure out where was these at now. And the interesting twist on it, even the residual number that they have on their usage numbers right now, trying to put together exports and domestic crush, is one of the highest for this December 1st level we've had in the last 5 or 6 years. over 200 million on residual. So there's still there's beans out there. The stocks reports saying there's less beans than even this might happen. So it's an interesting issue on the soybean side, and that's why we had the quick reaction, and we even had some follow through yesterday on things as we started to approach the $16 mark in the soybeans at this point from there. So definitely the soybean numbers in the U.S. and even with the tightening of South America, because they did take down Argentina by 4 million in output, but they did raise Brazil's number up 1 million on that one. On the prospects of the northern parts of Brazil being pretty good. Now, there's still some dryness in Rio Grande in the south, which impacts some things, but it right now, at least the north is being projected as pretty good crop in South America. So the world numbers, definitely tightened up, and that's what got the markets excited on the soybean side.
Yes, and in terms of the market speculation, I think this starting year will have major things with the weather speculation. We had several floods in California and in the United States, and I think many of the speculation will start again for wheat with the impacts of the drought that the drought will have on in the wheat crop in Argentina.
Well, that's on a longer term basis. The crop, Argentina's wheat crop is pretty well completed at this point. That's actually part of the reason why there's a certain amount of beans and corn that are planted after the harvest down there. There's a lot of what the U.S. calls wheat beans planted in the eastern U.S. Well, that's a lot of that's also done in Argentina on and that. So that's part of the reason things were being not the whole crop of soybeans is planted in what would be called their spring. They kind of wait to summer or midsummer at least, and to get that done. The West Coast situation is kind of an interesting one with the weather starting to really starting to finally give them some big time rains out there. That is an indication that potentially La Nina is trying to, in essence, subside, and some of these particular weather systems that were basically going further north and coming in from Pacific Northwest or even from Canada, and that is because that moisture in the the temperatures in the oceans there along the equator potentially could be subsiding in the warm temperatures coming up there. But I guess the one thing is interesting right now. That could be a sign that things might be changing on the U.S. Summertime moisture through the central and southern plains. But right now, it hasn't really provided. It seems like the weather comes into the West Coast, hits it hard, and then by the time it gets enough moisture in the central U.S., it's kind of past a lot of Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Texas areas before we've had some really nasty storms in the south, particularly east of Mississippi, and so I think that's the other twist of this. But it's definitely something to keep in mind that that potential is there. I guess the one thing that could happen here is if this thing hangs on in South America for another, I don't know, month to 2 month period of time, it can make a significant damage. There were some people last week projecting some pretty interesting levels there on both corn and soybeans from the Buenos Aires Exchange, and that they really weren't projecting what that's their number, but if things continue to be extreme, we're talking about numbers into the 30s, maybe even on both those crops down there, which would be a significant setback to the world on production on both of those. But right now, at least, that's something to keep in mind. On I think the market though, and on uh, wasn't totally fixated on what was going on in that. They were watching the USDA's numbers.
Yes, and what about the upcoming week that will have will be a shorter week because of the Monday holiday in the United States?
Yes, yes. Well, end up uh, that's always interesting. I think that's part of the reason maybe some of these markets were a little bit lack the follow throughs you might have thought we'd find, and maybe on things were kind of modest or corrected a little bit there, because there's always a possibility that rains could be heavier in South America or something like that. Particularly the corn numbers here that the USDA put out uh, on Thursday make things definitely a little more interesting per se. With the one thing is it's got the trade really scratching their head, and I'm not sure they should be that wondering about why we had a 1.6 million 1.6 million acres reduction in corn, primarily because the fact that in harvested acres, because the USDA this year decided in September that they'd had enough information to project harvested acres. But the impact of the dry, I think the one thing that also I don't think was totally dialed in was the dry acres and the forage needs and things like that. So I think the silage factor came in and made an impact in the Nebraska, Kansas, Texas type situations, in that, along with the dryness, that prompted less harvested acres for corn. And so that was the big feature. The When you take that many acres out, though, you do end up when you take numbers out there that are zero into your average, the average normally goes up on the remaining acres. Now, I don't know if there's any big boost in yields nationwide. It was just the fact we had less harvested acres. When you put even if the 170 bushels was only 150, it was still 150. If it's down to zero, it kind of helps it going the other way. The South American side of things on corn definitely is a factor here. There's a lot of reports from Argentina the last week or so about significant impact on their first crop corn out there from that point. The USDA was rather modest, only a 3 million metric ton decline on corn from 55 down to 52. I think there's a lot that could also have a factor. So in general, these latest USDA numbers have, I think, put a little bit more of a base under us here. There's people kind of feeling like, oh well, South America is just going to compensate for everything, and we're all going to, be happy with all the bushels we have from there. So that's one of the features there. Yeah, the other twist in this thing that kind of complicated people while we're looking at the bullish side of these markets in corn and soybeans. The wheat market had a minor adjustment in its ending stocks for on wheat this year, but they had a huge jump in the expectations for plantings, up about 3.7 million, about 2 million of that's higher than the trade was looking for from there. And but the thing about it is that Texas was 1.6 of that. We had 500,000 acres in Oklahoma and Texas. So a whole bunch of that was in areas that we don't know if there's these wheat is going to be able to be harvested, either from graze outs or from other things like just the damage. Right now, we had a cold spell that hit down in Texas again. I think we'd have a big amount of, winter kill. But all the U.S. and the world major crops had some interesting information, and that in the latest USDA's updates, and it's going to be kind of an interesting minefield as we go forward here. on things. The South American weather is going to continue to be a important factor to some extent. Any rains of substance. Now, right now, a quarter, a half an inch of rain in Argentina is not going to get people shook up in the bull world. But if we're talking about a, a big change of a 2 or 3, 4 inch type situation, and that's kind of how droughts kind of stop, as we have one big burst that starts them, and that'll be watched by the trade very closely at this point. And it would probably, even if the other factors in here are still shaky, the South America weather is going to be important, and of course, what's going on in Black Sea, that in the Black Sea situation, continues to be a factor in here. The Russian inspectors continue to be pretty slow getting to the boats, and then also I think this whole issue about uh, shipping insurance and the impact on how many boats can make it into Ukraine versus other places is going to be a factor going forward. So it's going to be a choppy world as we go forward here on these markets. But if there's rallies up against the $16 mark on March beans, or if corn makes it up against this 680 or 690 zone, they're ahead of the $7. People should keep kind of scaling up their sales on that, because as I said, when you're dealing with weather markets, they can always turn on you very, very quickly. And that longer term, we still got a long ways to go here to figure out for sure what 2023 crop year is going to be. But right now, at least there's a little tighter supplies in people's hands than some people thought.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
You bet. Ended up, yes, the